If that radar is right, gentlemen, then 6 ships just sailed out of empty water. Lieutenant Ryan Cole said it without looking away from the main screen, but every man in the North Bay Naval Station radar room felt the sentence settle over the consoles like cold fog. The room was sealed, cold, and humming with electricity. Green radar light moved across tired faces. Beyond the reinforced windows, the coastal antenna turned high above the base, sweeping the Atlantic wind in slow circles. Each rotation should have painted the same restricted water 12 miles offshore. Empty. Clear. Save for the carrier group moving toward the exercise corridor. Instead, every third sweep brought 6 bright contacts onto the screen. 6 ships that Coastal Watch could not see. 6 ships that Harbor Patrol denied. 6 ships that vanished after 3 seconds, then returned 17 seconds later in the exact same place, as if the Atlantic had learned how to lie on schedule. Ethan Brooks slapped one palm against the edge of the console. That is impossible. At 26, Ethan was the youngest lead radar technician North Bay had ever promoted. Every certification he had earned seemed to stand behind his voice. The array is clean, he said. The processors are clean. The feed is clean. There is nothing wrong with this system. The screen blinked again. 6 white contacts appeared, held, then disappeared. A low murmur passed through the room. Lieutenant Cole stood behind Ethan with his arms folded. He was 29, pressed sharp, jaw tight, and carrying the look of a man who knew senior officers were waiting upstairs for one clear answer. A carrier strike group was less than 40 miles offshore. If North Bay radar could not be trusted, the exercise would stop before it began. Run it again, Cole ordered. Ethan's fingers moved across the keyboard. Status bars crawled across the monitors. Every major test came back green. Every computer insisted the station was healthy. Yet the radar kept painting ghosts. Near the back wall, almost hidden beside a rack of spare headsets and old binders, Walter Mercer stood with both hands tucked into the pockets of a faded navy blue jacket. He had said almost nothing since a security escort brought him into the room 20 minutes earlier. Walter was 78, white-haired, thin through the shoulders, and quiet in a way that made younger men mistake him for harmless. His shoes were old but polished. His hands were spotted with age. His eyes did not chase the lights on the screen. He watched the antenna through the window. Mostly, he listened. The great radar tower groaned faintly as it turned into the wind. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a tired metal note buried beneath the electronics and clipped voices. Walter heard it anyway. Ethan finally noticed him and turned with a humorless laugh. Is this some kind of joke? Who let someone's grandfather into a secure radar room? Several technicians looked down at their consoles. No one laughed loudly. No one stopped him either. Lieutenant Cole glanced at Walter, then back to the screen, already deciding the old man was one more distraction he did not have time for. Walter did not answer the insult. He lifted his eyes toward the window as the antenna completed another sweep. On the screen, the 6 phantom ships appeared again, exactly on cue. The next sweep came clean for 8 seconds, long enough for one technician to breathe out. Then the false contacts returned in the same tight cluster off the eastern approach lane. Log the interval, Cole said. 17 seconds, a technician answered. Same as before. They appear after every third antenna cycle, hold for 3 seconds, then drop. Cole turned toward communications. Any confirmation from Coastal Watch? Negative, sir. Coastal Watch shows clear water. Harbor Patrol shows clear water. Air surveillance shows nothing below 5,000 feet in that grid. The room grew quieter. One system wrong was a malfunction. 3 systems disagreeing was a crisis wearing a technical mask. Ethan opened another diagnostic panel. It could be external interference. A civilian vessel running illegal equipment. Atmospheric ducting. A bad filter in the identification feed. Maybe is not an explanation, Cole said. The words landed hard. On a side monitor, the exercise countdown continued. The carrier group had reached 38 miles offshore. Cole picked up the secure phone and gave a careful report. Intermittent false returns. Ongoing system review. No confirmed surface contacts. Temporary hold recommended. When he hung up, the room felt smaller. Walter had not moved. His eyes followed the antenna through the window, then drifted to the old analog repeater mounted above a storage cabinet. It was a forgotten backup display, its soft green sweep line crawling around a dusty circular face. When the modern screen bloomed with 6 false contacts, the old repeater gave the smallest twitch at the edge of its trace. Walter saw it. No one else did. Ethan ran another test. It came back green, which made the failure more embarrassing. The system says it is fine, Ethan muttered. Walter finally spoke, low and calm. Systems say plenty of things when they are scared of being blamed. Ethan turned slowly. Excuse me. Walter kept looking at the antenna. Nothing. Cole exhaled through his nose. Mr. Mercer, with respect, this room is handling an active operational issue. Walter nodded once. I understand. Outside, the wind shifted from the northeast. The antenna entered the gust, gave that faint tired groan again, and 6 impossible contacts appeared as if summoned by the sound. Cole looked at the wall clock, then at Walter. Mr. Mercer, you were brought in because Admiral Harlan's office had your name on an old consultant list. That does not mean this room can stop for personal theories. Walter turned from the window. Green light brushed the lines in his face and made his eyes look almost gray. I understand, he said again. Ethan leaned back with a sharp little smile. What systems did you work on, exactly? Before everything went digital. Shipboard search radar. Surface sets. Air search. Fire control support. Mostly the kind that had to work when weather did not feel like cooperating. Ethan gave a short laugh. Right. Vacuum tubes, grease pencils, maybe a coffee can full of spare fuses. Airman Lucas Reed looked up from the communications log. He was 22, sandy-haired, and careful. He had been watching Walter since the old man came in. Not because Walter looked important. Because he did not. Everyone else moved like the malfunction was chasing them. Walter moved like he was waiting for the malfunction to confess. Cole stepped closer. No one doubts you served. But this is a modern coastal defense radar tied into a joint exercise network. It is not a destroyer set from 50 years ago. Walter nodded. Machines get newer. Bad habits do not. Ethan's smile vanished. This machine is worth $40 million. Then it can afford to be listened to. The room went still for half a breath. The antenna swept through its arc, proud against the pale sky. On the main screen, 6 false contacts appeared again. Ethan pointed at them. There. That is signal behavior. Not some loose screw singing in the breeze. Walter looked at the contacts, then at the old repeater, then toward the ceiling speaker where the antenna rotation tone bled faintly through the building audio. It is not singing, he said. It is catching. Ethan stared. Catching. Just a little. Cole's patience thinned. Catching where? Walter lifted one hand toward the window. At the top of the sweep. When the wind comes from the northeast. Ethan turned toward the others with theatrical disbelief. Perfect. We have a weather poet. Nobody laughed this time. Lucas looked from the main screen to the timestamp column, then to the camera feed showing the radar tower. He could not prove anything yet, but the pattern had begun to feel less random. Walter lowered his hand and slipped it into his jacket pocket. His fingers found a small leather pouch scarred by oil, salt, and years. Ethan saw the motion and his mouth twisted. Please tell me you are not about to pull a pocket tool from the Eisenhower administration and solve a classified radar fault. The insult carried across the room, louder than it needed to be. Walter looked down at the pouch for one quiet second, then let his hand fall away. He did not defend it. He did not defend himself. That irritated Ethan more than any argument could have. This is exactly the problem, Ethan said, turning toward Cole. We are burning time while a retired analog technician guesses at wind noises. I have 3 diagnostic suites running, a live network feed, and a full component history on this array. The system is not pointing to the antenna. Walter looked at the tower. That is because the system is inside the problem. Ethan laughed once, hard and empty. That is not how diagnostics work. Sometimes it is. Cole raised a hand. The pressure in the room was working on him. Every minute pulled the carrier group closer. Every false return made his command look weaker. Every calm sentence from Walter sounded, to Cole, like a challenge delivered in front of subordinates. Mr. Mercer, Cole said, you need to understand the scale of this. This array feeds command channels, ship traffic, airspace coordination, and exercise control. We cannot climb a tower because someone hears a squeak. It is not the squeak. Then what is it? Ethan snapped. Walter waited. The antenna swung again. The faint groan came through the building. The old repeater twitched. The modern screen bloomed with 6 white marks. Walter pointed, not at the main display, but at the repeater. There. The old trace twitches before your digital display paints the ghosts. Lucas looked up sharply. He had noticed the same thing, but hearing it spoken made the hair rise along his arms. Ethan glanced at the repeater and scoffed. That relic is not part of the active diagnostic chain. No, Walter said. That is why it is telling the truth. A few heads turned toward the forgotten instrument. Dust clung to its casing. The green sweep line crawled around the round face, patient and nearly ignored. Ethan stepped in front of Walter's view. Sir, with respect, you are out of your depth. You probably did good work in your time. Nobody is taking that away. But this is not a museum tour. This is not a storm story from an old ship. This is an operational room in the 21st century, and you are distracting my team. The word respect sounded naked without meaning behind it. Cole said nothing. Walter's face changed only slightly. Not anger. Not embarrassment. A shadow moved behind his eyes, made by years and weather and names no one in the room knew. I have been distracting machines longer than you have been. Alive, he said softly. Ethan flushed. That is enough. Cole straightened. Mr. Mercer, step away from the consoles. Walter had never touched them. Still, he obeyed. He moved back one step, slow and dignified. His gaze stayed on the antenna as the wind shifted again from the northeast. The tower gave that tired metal note. The old repeater twitched. The digital screen filled with 6 impossible ships. This time, Lucas wrote down the exact second. He kept his pencil still afterward, afraid even the scratch of graphite might draw attention before he understood what he had seen. 17 seconds. Northeast gust. Old repeater twitch. 6 false contacts. He looked at Walter, who now stood one pace back from the consoles with the calm posture of a man who had already been dismissed by louder rooms and survived them all. Walter did not look wounded by the insult. That was the strange part. He looked somewhere else. The clean walls of North Bay thinned around him. The green glow became the dim circle of an older screen aboard the United States ship Kepler, 49 years earlier, in a winter storm off the North Atlantic. Walter was 29 again, hands smelling of machine oil and salt. Rain struck the ship so hard it sounded like gravel poured from the sky. The surface search radar had begun painting false returns where open water should have been. Officers argued. Technicians changed modules. The logs insisted the set was stable. But Walter could hear the antenna above them. There was a catch at the top of the sweep, a tiny mechanical hesitation buried under the storm. A young lieutenant named Thomas Harlan stood behind him that night, soaked from crossing the weather deck, his face pale under red light but his voice steady. Harlan was not an admiral then. He was a junior officer with bright eyes, a wet collar, and too much responsibility arriving too fast. "Mercer," he had said, leaning over the old display, "tell me what I am looking at." Walter wiped condensation from the glass with the heel of his hand. "You are looking at water that is not there, sir." Harlan stared. "Can you prove that?" "Not from in here." The memory sharpened. Walter remembered. Climbing to the antenna platform, clipped to a safety line, every step deliberate. No heroics. No speeches. Just a sailor going where the problem was. At the antenna mount, beneath cracked paint and salt crust, he found the bonding strap split almost clean through. Each time the wind loaded the antenna from the northeast, the broken strap shifted against metal and threw a dirty pulse back into the system. A ghost born from corrosion. A lie made by vibration. He replaced the strap with a spare from his pouch, tightened the fasteners by feel, and watched the antenna settle into a clean, honest turn. When he came back below, dripping water onto deck plates, the screen was clear. Lieutenant Harlan looked at him for a long second. Not with surprise. With the first real respect a young officer gives when he realizes rank and wisdom are not always stored in the same place. The past loosened. Walter returned to the cold control room at North Bay. Ethan was still talking. Cole was still tense. The modern radar still painted ghosts on polished glass. Walter blinked once, slow and steady, and his hand found the old pouch in his jacket pocket. Outside, the antenna turned into the same northeast wind, and the same tired note came down through the tower. Walter stepped closer to the window, careful not to give Cole another reason to order him back. The glass reflected his face over the pale morning outside. His eyes traced the antenna boom, the support yoke, and the rotation housing. Nothing looked broken. That was the trick. The worst faults rarely announced themselves with smoke. They hid under paint, routine, and instruments that only knew how to say normal. The wind came clean from the northeast, carrying salt and cold spray across the base. Walter heard it hit the tower before anyone else felt it. The antenna reached the top of its sweep. A barely visible shutter moved through the far end of the frame. Small enough to miss. Clear enough for a man listening for habit. The old repeater twitched. The modern display painted 6 bright ghosts into empty water. Walter smiled. It was not triumphant. It was small, almost sad, the kind a man gives when the past returns wearing a different uniform. He pointed through the window. "Your problem is not in the water," he said. "It is up there." Nobody spoke for half a second. Then Ethan turned around so sharply his tablet nearly slipped. "You cannot possibly know that. I know when a machine is telling me where to look. You are guessing." "No," Walter said. "Guessing is what you do after the screen fails you. Listening is what you do before that." Cole moved beside Ethan. His face was controlled but strained. "Explain it." Walter pointed toward the antenna mount. At the top of the sweep, when the wind loads it from that side, the frame hesitates. Less than a blink. The old repeater sees the disturbance before your processed feed cleans it up and turns it into something pretty. That is why your ghost targets arrive on schedule. It is not random. It is mechanical. Ethan's jaw tightened. "The rotation sensor is green." "I believe it." "The grounding checks are green." "I believe that too." Ethan threw one hand toward the tower. "Then what exactly are you accusing the antenna of doing?" Walter lowered his arm. Remembering salt. The phrase hung there, strange and heavy. Lucas looked down at his logbook. The timestamps lined up. Every false contact followed the same northeast lode. Every twitch came before the digital bloom. He enlarged the tower camera feed on his side monitor. At first, he saw nothing but clean rotation. Then the wind hit. The far end of the antenna dipped a fraction of an inch, recovered, and completed the sweep. Lucas felt his throat go dry. Ethan was still talking, louder now, fighting not just Walter but the possibility that Walter might be right. You want us to shut down a $40 million radar array and send a crew up a tower because you saw a wiggle? Walter looked at him directly. There was no anger in his face. No, he said. I want you to stop blaming the ocean for something the tower is doing to itself. Cole's radio crackled with another request from exercise control. The carrier group was closing the distance. Cole looked toward Lucas. Reed, do you have anything? Lucas straightened. His mouth went dry. Ethan turned toward him, warning already in his eyes. Sir, Lucas said, I have a timing overlay. Ethan cut in. The tower camera is not part of the diagnostic procedure. Cole did not look away from Lucas. Show me. Lucas put the tower camera on a side display and overlaid the radar contact log. Northeast gust. Tiny dip. Old repeater twitch. 6 false contacts. Every 17 seconds. The pattern repeated with the patience of a metronome. No one spoke. Ethan's face hardened. It is correlation. Not cause. Walter nodded. Then go find the cause. Ethan stepped toward Cole. Lieutenant, I recommend we remove the civilian consultant from the floor before this turns into superstition. Cole hesitated. The hesitation told Lucas everything. The lieutenant was no longer sure, but he was still afraid of looking like he had surrendered the room to an old man. Mr. Mercer, Cole said, please wait outside until we call for you. Walter did not protest. He glanced once more at the antenna, then turned toward the door with the slow dignity of a man who had been dismissed before by people who later wished they had listened sooner. As he passed Lucas's station, Walter paused just long enough to look at the overlay. He saw the timestamps. He saw that Lucas knew. Walter gave the faintest nod. Not permission. Not command. Recognition. The door closed behind him. Lucas reached for the secure directory, found the number for Rear Admiral Thomas Harlan's aide, and pressed the button. The line clicked twice before a crisp voice answered. Admiral Harlan's office. Lucas kept his voice low. This is Airman Lucas Reed at North Bay Radar Control. I know this is outside normal reporting channels, but we have an active fault, and there is a civilian consultant here named Walter Mercer. The line went quiet. Not confused quiet. Not impatient quiet. The kind of quiet that meant a name had reached a place where it still mattered. The aide spoke again, slower. Say that name again. Walter Mercer, sir. He just pointed at the antenna. The aide did not speak for 3 full seconds. Lucas heard paper shift, a chair move, then the aide's voice returned stripped of routine. Airman Reed, remain on this line. The call clicked into hold. No music played. Only clean silence. Across the room, Ethan pushed the team through another diagnostic loop. His confidence had become too loud to be natural. Outside the sealed door, Walter waited in the corridor beside a framed photograph of North Bay Naval Station from 1983. The antenna in the photograph was smaller, simpler, built in an era when men still trusted dials, grease marks, and the sound of metal in weather. Walter folded his hands in front of him and listened through the wall. The modern tower groaned again. Behind the door, the ghost contacts returned. Upstairs, Rear Admiral Thomas Harlan was in the observation suite when his aide entered and leaned close. "Sir," the aide said quietly, "North Bay Radar Control has Airman Reed on the line. He says Walter Mercer is there." Harlan's hand stopped above the map. Nothing else in the room moved, but the temperature seemed to change. He turned slowly. "Walter Mercer?" "Yes, sir." "At the radar room?" "Yes, sir." "The airman says Mr. Mercer pointed at the antenna." The Admiral's face lost all its public calm. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. The kind that rises from deep memory. He took the phone. "This is Rear Admiral Harlan." Lucas nearly stood by instinct. "Sir." Did he smile before he pointed? The question was so strange that Lucas glanced at the closed door, as if Walter might hear it through steel. "Yes, sir." He did. Harlan closed his eyes for half a breath. When he opened them, command had returned with purpose. "Listen carefully, Airman Reed. Do not let that man leave the building." "Yes, sir." "And do not let anyone touch that antenna until I get there." The line went dead. Upstairs, Harlan handed the phone back and turned to the room. "The exercise hold remains in place." One captain frowned. "Sir, Lieutenant Cole reports no confirmed tower fault." Harlan was already moving toward the door. "Lieutenant Cole does not know what he has in his hallway." "Sir." Harlan stopped just long enough to look back. "In 1976, that man saved my ship by hearing what a radar set could not say. If Walter Mercer is pointing at an antenna, then gentlemen, the antenna is where the truth is hiding." "No." One asked another question. Chairs slid back. Harlan walked fast down the corridor, two officers falling in behind him. Below them, Lucas hung up and looked toward the door where Walter waited alone. The old man had not raised his voice. Yet somewhere above them, a rear admiral had just stopped an entire briefing because he remembered Walter Mercer being right. The door to radar control opened before Ethan could start the next diagnostic cycle. Every conversation in the room fell apart. Rear Admiral Thomas Harlan stepped through in dark service uniform. Cole turned so fast the secure phone cord tapped against the console. Ethan straightened. Lucas stood without being told. Walter remained in the corridor for one more second, framed by the doorway, his faded jacket small against the sudden weight of rank moving toward him. Harlan did not look at the screens first. He did not ask for a report. He walked straight to Walter, stopped an arm's length away, and gave the old man a slow, formal salute. The room went silent enough to hear the antenna turning above the roof. Walter looked at him for a long moment, then returned the salute with a hand that moved carefully but did not tremble. "Tom Harlan," Walter said softly. "You got old." The admiral's mouth tightened with something that was almost a smile. "So did the Navy, Walt. But apparently it still needs you." No one moved. Ethan's face drained of color. Cole stared as if the floor had shifted under his polished shoes. Harlan turned, and the warmth vanished from his voice. "Lieutenant Cole, why is Mr. Mercer standing outside my radar room?" Cole swallowed. "Sir, we were attempting to maintain procedure during an active fault." "Procedure is useful," Harlan said. "Until it becomes a wall between you and the answer." He looked toward the main display as 6 false contacts bloomed across empty water. The admiral did not flinch. "Mr. Mercer, what do you need?" Walter stepped back into the room. "Permission to inspect the antenna mount. 1 tower crew. 1 electrician. 1 replacement bonding strap. And someone to stop telling me the computer is comfortable." Harlan nodded once. "Granted." 20 minutes later, the tower platform was secured and the array was locked in maintenance position. Walter climbed with the tower crew, clipped to the safety rail, refusing help unless safety required it. The room below watched through the camera feed. At the antenna mount, Walter knelt beside a bracket half hidden beneath gray marine paint. The bonding strap looked intact from the front. He brushed away salt crust with a gloved thumb, lifted the edge, and exposed a dark split running beneath the painted surface. The electrician leaned closer, then looked directly into the camera. "Strap is fractured under the coating," he reported. "Intermittent contact under load." No one in radar control spoke. Ethan stared at the screen as if the words had reached across the room and placed a hand on the back of his neck. The strap was replaced. The fasteners were tightened. The antenna was released back into motion. One sweep passed. Then another. Then another. The old repeater stayed smooth. The modern display stayed clean. Empty water finally looked empty again. The red warning lamp went dark, and the only sound left was the steady hum of a machine no longer lying to itself. Exercise control cleared the hold 12 minutes later. The carrier group entered the corridor under clean radar. North Bay returned to normal operations, but no one in the radar room felt normal anymore. Respect does not always arrive as applause. Sometimes it arrives as silence after a machine stops lying. Walter came down from the tower with his old leather pouch zipped in one hand. Salt dust marked his jacket sleeve. He looked smaller than the story forming around him. Harlan met him at the front of the room. "Gentlemen," the Admiral said, loud enough for every technician, officer, and airman to hear, "this man saved my ship before most of you were born. Today, he saved your exercise by doing what all good sailors learn to do." He listened. Cole stepped forward first. His voice was low. "Mr. Mercer, I owe you an apology. I treated your experience like an obstacle." Walter looked at him plainly. "You were trying to protect your command. I almost protected it from the answer." Walter gave a small nod. "That is the part to remember." Ethan came next. He looked younger now, stripped of the hard shine he had worn all morning. "Sir," Ethan said, "I was wrong." Walter held his gaze, not cruelly, not proudly. "You were loud," he said. "That is not the same as being wrong forever." Ethan lowered his eyes. The correction landed harder because there was mercy in it. Lucas stood at his station, unsure whether he should speak. Walter looked toward him and lifted one hand slightly. "Airman Reed, listen twice," Walter said. "That matters." Harlan turned to Lucas. "It does." The airman straightened, face pale with the kind of pride he would remember for the rest of his career. Then the Admiral faced the room again. "From this point forward, the old analog repeater stays powered, maintained, and logged. Not because it is better than the system. Because it reminds us that backup instruments, old hands, and quiet warnings are not decorations." He looked at Ethan. "They are part of the watch." Ethan nodded. "Yes, Admiral." Before Walter could slip away, Harlan removed a small challenge coin from his pocket. It was worn at the edges. He placed it in Walter's palm and closed the old man's fingers around it. Walter looked down. The coin carried the faded crest of the United States ship Kepler. Harlan's voice dropped. "I should have given that back to you a long time ago." Walter's jaw tightened once. "You kept it." "I kept the lesson." For the first time that morning, Walter had no quick answer. He looked toward the antenna turning cleanly into the northeast wind, then at the old repeater sweeping its small green line around the dusty face. "That will do," he said. Later that week, a brass plate was mounted beneath the analog repeater in North Bay radar control. Walter Mercer. Radar technician. He heard the tower before the screen did. The official maintenance report listed a fractured bonding strap, intermittent contact under wind load, and false surface returns caused by mechanical disturbance. But the training file carried a different title. Mercer's sweep. Months later, Lucas Reed stood before a new group of radar trainees and played the recording from that morning. They heard the false contacts. They heard Ethan's confidence. They heard Walter's quiet voice. The old trace twitches before your digital display paints the ghosts. Lucas paused the recording there. He pointed to the dusty analog repeater, now cleaned, maintained, and glowing beside its brass plate. Remember this, he told them. The screen can show you a contact. The system can give you a status. But judgment begins when you ask what the machine is trying to say before it becomes obvious. Outside, the Atlantic wind moved across North Bay. The antenna turned. The repeater swept. The water stayed empty. And somewhere in the clean silence between one rotation and the next, an old sailor's lesson remained on watch.